In that first game on Tuesday against the Golden Knights, the Kraken managed to get a lot of firsts out of the way. Their first game, obviously, their first goal, first power play, first penalty kill, first comeback, first loss, and even their first game-deciding BS call against them. But with their second game in Nashville, could they get that first win? What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back for some more Kraken R&R, which of course stands for recap and reaction. Although, if games keep going like these first two have, we might need some rest and relaxation as well, but definitely not just yet. For the Kraken, it's 2 down and at least 80 more to go. And just like the first game, this one also ends up 4-3. But unlike the first game, to answer that question from just a little bit ago, the Kraken do end up winning and getting that first win in franchise history. Let's go! As the game gets started, it's worth mentioning that once again, it is Grubauer in net for the Kraken for the second game in a row. Though with especially how the third period of this game would end up going, I think there's a pretty decent chance that he'll end up getting a break for this next game and we'll see Drieger in Columbus. But in front of Grubauer, things did look pretty different as the Kraken continued to do a lot of mixing and matching to see what's going to work and end up sticking early on in the season. Now, that first line of forwards did remain the same. That's the McCann line with Eberle and Schwartz, but beyond that, pretty much everything looked different. Even getting our first look at the newly acquired Alex Barré-Boulet, who the Kraken got off of waivers from Tampa just before the game against Vegas, as he was winger on the second line. And even as far as the defense is concerned, where early on we thought it was pretty much a lock that we'd see Oleksiak alongside Giordano, they're still trying to figure out what works best on that first pairing, as this time it was Soucy alongside the captain. As the game got started, early in the first period it was pretty back and forth with the puck moving up and down the ice quite a bit, but unfortunately, again it's Seattle having to play from behind early as a shot coming off of a defensive zone faceoff ends up over the leg of Grubauer and into the net, Nashville taking the early lead in their home opener. Fortunately though for the Kraken, even though they did once again fall behind within the first 4 minutes of a game, they did pretty much start to take control of it right after that, as they were able to control the puck mostly in the offensive zone for a large majority of the remainder of the first period, though early on they couldn't get a whole lot of solid chances as Nashville, a solid defensive team, was able to really limit Seattle's chances on net and keep any chances they did have mostly to the outside. Now, Saros did have to make some saves, but again, he really didn't face all that many high danger chances, as really early on, the best chance the Kraken were able to get was due to some fancy puck handling from Donskoy, a spin move to get it to Dunn in the open, who got a good shot off, but with no one really screening it, Saros was able to get a pad on that one and deflect it wide. And although again Seattle was able to continue to control the zone, they just really couldn't end up making a whole lot of it as we got through the first half of the first period. Now, the Kraken weren't perfect, as they did have a couple of possessional hiccups with a couple of pretty bad defensive zone turnovers from Oleksiak and Barré-Boulet, though fortunately they were able to match that with some solid defensive play of their own, and Nashville really wasn't able to make anything happen from either one of those turnovers. As the period goes on though and we get into the second half of it, Seattle does start to get a few more decent scoring chances, first with a little bit of a breakaway from Eberle, though he does have some pressure on him. He's able to spin and get another good chance for Dunn out in the open, but Saros is able to gobble that one up as well. Then soon after that, it was Sheahan to Appleton in front of the net, and he just can't quite get it past Saros. And again, we remain 1-0 Nashville as it becomes clear that Saros is going to make it difficult on the Kraken to even things up. On the other end though, it's clear that at this point Seattle's up to the task defensively and going to make it equally as hard on Nashville, not just to score that second goal, but even just get and maintain possession of the puck, as Lauzon and Dunn lay massive back-to-back hits in the defensive zone, the second of which Nashville takes a little bit of an exception to, and Trenin comes up and gets in Dunn's face right away and throws the gloves. Lauzon did come over to try to kind of take the fight off of Dunn's hands, as he was definitely outmatched size-wise by Trenin, but Dunn wasn't having any of that. When it came to the first fight in franchise history, you bet he was going to take that one, and he held his own against a much bigger Trenin. Not only did he hold his own though, but as they both go to the box for fighting, Trenin also gets a roughing call tacked onto it, and Seattle goes on to the power play for the first time in the game. And less than a minute into that power play, it's McCann from the top of the zone with a deflection, and a great screen by Shorts to get it past Saros to even things up, for the first power play goal in Seattle Kraken franchise history. Now, again, much like their goal in Vegas, it was hard to tell at first whether it was going to be McCann with the shot or Schwartz with a potential deflection that was going to end up getting credit for the goal. But once again, the deflection ended up coming off of the defenseman, and it's McCann that gets credit for the goal. And the craziness wasn't done just yet, as just seconds after the ensuing faceoff, Seattle would go back on the power play as Nashville would get caught for a tripping call. And early on in this power play, it wasn't a goal that had the crowd reacting, as Donato and Harper get tangled up going into the boards, and the crowd definitely wants a call here, but fortunately Donato was able to ease up and prevent too much obvious intentional contact, and so there's no call, and the power play goes on, Seattle up 5-on-4. And it's a good thing too, because with the second power play, Seattle had a much harder time getting things set up and running on the power play in the offensive zone and getting shots off on Saros, but one last offensive zone faceoff saw the Kraken get control, and a series of passes found their way to Donskoy, who gets it to Wemberg in front of the net, who tries to get it around Saros, but just can't quite make it happen as he loses the puck on the way to the backhand. Fortunately though, Tanev is there to scoop it up and put it into basically an empty net, making it 2-1 Kraken with the second straight power play goal. And Tanev made sure to get a little extra at the end as he skates away from the goal, blowing a little kiss to the crowd, which I'm sure they really enjoyed. Though the fans didn't seem like they were the only ones who may have taken a little bit of an exception to Tanev's post-goal celly, as just seconds after this ensuing faceoff, Tanev does get called for an interference, but this does not lead to a Nashville power play, because just after Tanev gets called for a penalty, Forsberg also gets caught for an unsportsmanlike conduct, as I don't really know what happened as they didn't show it, but I think he might have had some words for Tanev that, may have been a little bit too close to an official. So we would close out what turned into a pretty interesting first period with 2 minutes of 4-on-4 hockey, which ultimately didn't really lead to much of anything, and we go into the first break, Kraken up 2-1. Coming out into the second period, whether it was the intermission itself or the kind of uneventful 4-on-4 that closed out the first period, the momentum definitely seemed to have evened out at the start of the period, and Nashville gets a couple of early chances on Grubauer, but he makes a couple of big saves, and Seattle starts to get things rolling in their favor once again, as Geeky creates a couple of chances in the offensive zone, though neither of those end up leading to anything, and eventually Larson ends up getting caught with a cross-check to the back of Cousins on Nashville, and this is one where, even though the NHL has said that they're going to be cracking down on cross-checking this year, this would have been cross-checking in just about any year of NHL, as Larson really can't be doing that kind of thing. Nashville this time does go on the power play. The good news for the Kraken on this first penalty kill of the game for them is that they looked pretty good on it, really limiting Nashville's options and not giving them too many good shots off on Grubauer, even getting the puck out of the zone and killing a fair amount of time. The bad news is that late in the penalty kill, as things were starting to wind down and we were getting ready to go back to 5-on-5, Tanev gets caught for a slashing in the neutral zone and we go to 5-on-3, where it really did not take Nashville very long to take advantage of it, as Forsberg gets one past Grubauer with plenty of open ice to work with. And of course, because that was still at 5-on-3, they remain on the power play then for over a minute and a half going on past that. And although this second penalty kill didn't look quite as good as that first half of the first one, Seattle is able to kill off the remaining 90 seconds of that penalty kill, thanks in large part to a couple of big saves from Grubauer on 4 shots on goal by Nashville in the closing minute of that power play. And it wasn't just the scoreboard that seemed to have evened out after those back-to-back power plays for the Predators, as the momentum itself had also seemed to pretty much even out between the two teams. Things really went back and forth there again for a few minutes without either team getting too many great chances outside of Eberle getting one really nice chance off that Saros absolutely robbed him on, which for him is probably starting to get a little bit frustrating, as that is 2 games in a row that he's had pretty good chances without getting anything in the net, but it'll come for him. Play stayed like that, going back and forth for a few minutes without either team showing obvious momentum until the Kraken got their second line back on the ice, who immediately took over the offensive zone, and it wasn't too long before Alex Barré-Boulet found Wennberg on a beautiful pass across the zone, who buried it into, again, a basically open net as Saros wasn't able to get across in time. Wennberg puts the Kraken up 3-2, and Barré-Boulet gets on the board with his first point for Seattle, less than a week after having been claimed on waivers from Tampa Bay. That goal and the series that led up to it also seemed to help the Kraken reacquire and then maintain momentum of the game as the second period closed out. They weren't able to get on the scoreboard again before the end of the period, but did create a few more chances in the offensive zone, and also had what should have been another power play at the end of the period as Eberle got checked hard into the boards, but this one does end up getting missed, even without the emphasis that they're putting on cross-checking this season, this really should have gotten called. Even if this is any other season in the NHL, it was an obvious cross-check, but either way it gets missed, and we go into the third period still 5-on-5. Now, as the third period gets started, this isn't really something that I noticed in the Vegas game, although that could have been partially because Vegas was good enough to create their own momentum at periods during that game. But once again, for the second time this game, Seattle seemed to come out a little bit flat at the start of the period and really let Nashville kind of take momentum back, where Seattle again seemed to kind of have that on their side going into the break. So that'll definitely be something to watch again, especially with a Nashville team that, while they are good defensively, aren't really supposed to be all that great on the forward end. So it's kind of, I don't know, it seems weird that Seattle would have come out 2 periods in a row, seeming like they definitely had control of the game going into the intermission, but come out of it kind of a little bit lackluster and having lost some of that energy that they went into the break with. Fortunately, they were able to play very solid defensive hockey, and although Nashville controlled the puck for just about the entire third period and spent the vast majority of that in Seattle's defensive zone, they were able to really limit the chances for the Predators for the majority of that time and limit the shots to mostly coming from the outside. That having been said, Grubauer made a number of big-time saves as this period went on to keep Nashville off the board. And maybe one of the best examples of that comes with 5 minutes left in the third period. Nashville still in the Kraken defensive zone. They get a good open shot off on Grubauer with a bit of a screen, but he's able to save it. Can't collect the rebound though. Nashville does pick that up, gets it over to the other side, and another shot, but Grubauer manages to get over and save it again. I mean, Grubauer was really on top of it at this point, and honestly, as far as the third period is concerned, he's the only reason they end up hanging on to win this game. And again, it's not like Nashville was allowed to pepper Grubauer with shots or anything like that, as really, once again, Seattle was able to play pretty solidly defensively in their own zone and limit things to the outside, keep the puck up against the boards for the most part, and in stick fights along the boards, even actually getting possession of the puck a fair number of times in their own defensive zone, but they just couldn't manage to really maintain possession into the neutral zone very often, much less into the offensive zone, as they really, as far as I can remember, only had possession in Nashville's offensive zone 5-on-5 maybe twice during the entire third period, and neither one of those led to anything close to a shot on net. So Saros was pretty much just back there sucking on his water bottle, watching the game like the rest of the people in the arena. Fortunately, in spite of all of that, and Seattle icing the puck for what seemed like the 100th time in the period alone, plus a couple more big saves from Grubauer, they were able to keep the score at 3-2 and have that lead with 2 minutes left in the game, at which point Nashville had no other choice than to pull Saros, and it was 6-on-5 for the Kraken. Eventually, the Kraken do actually pretty shortly after it going to 6-on-5 manage to get control of the puck, fight it through the neutral zone, and maintain control. Coming into the offensive zone, Appleton gets, with some pressure on him, a shot off but misses the empty net. Fortunately for the Kraken though, McCann is there behind the net to pick up the puck and get it to Tanev all alone in front of the goal to get Seattle's first shot on goal of the third period, and because it was on an empty net, he puts it in to make it 4-2 Kraken, getting his second of the game. Although, since you may remember from the beginning of this, I did say the game ends 4-3, that 4-2 lead does not last very long, as once again, Nashville, with the extra man and an empty net, manages to get a rebound that once again comes off of a solid Grubauer save, but this time the second shot does manage to get past Grubauer and into the net, making it a 1-goal game once again. So even though we were feeling pretty good about a 2-goal lead with less than 2 minutes left, yeah, a safe win just wasn't going to be in the cards. I mean, I did say in the last R&R with Vegas that we should be expecting a lot of these close games as the season goes on with Seattle, so I guess it shouldn't have been too much of a surprise that this ended up being a 1-goal game, but kind of would have been nice if they could have really made this a little bit more comfortable at the end. Either way, a win is a win, as things do stay that way for the final 40 seconds of the game, and Seattle closes it out for the first win in franchise history, as they don't have to go to overtime to get it. So in the end with this one, again, coming off of a very solid game against Vegas, where they looked a lot more competitive against one of the league's better teams than even the most optimistic of us Seattle fans really thought they were going to in their first ever game as a franchise. They really managed to maintain a lot of that momentum, even coming out of a loss, coming into this Nashville game, and played a lot of that same style that we saw them play in Vegas with the aggressive forechecking, which leads to a lot of that offensive zone pressure that they've been able to get and even maintain at periods during both games. Now, it is that same aggressive forecheck that did lead to some of those miscues and defensive mistakes that ended up seeing a lot of odd man rushes and a couple early goals in the Vegas game. But against a team like Nashville, it did work out a little bit better, where they don't have quite the offensive firepower to take advantage of some of those mistakes. And to Seattle's credit, there really weren't anywhere near the same number of mistakes as they had in the Vegas game. Again, there was a couple of pretty bad looking turnovers in that first period in the offensive zone that might have not gone as well against a team like Vegas, but they were able to defend those really before they turned into shots on goal for Nashville. So I definitely would say that this was a noticeable step up in this second game as they ironed out some of the kinks in that pretty much same play style. And I also noticed, I would say, a fair amount less of that kind of switching and mixing and matching lines as they did towards the end of the Vegas game. There was still a little bit of it, but not nearly as much, which also may have helped. Although again, the third period didn't go particularly well, so who knows, but well, I shouldn't say that. They did play well defensively, they just couldn't get anything going offensively, but either way, in the end, a win is a win. The other thing I wanted to mention with this game, outside of Barre Boulet looking really good in his Kraken debut, again being a brand new guy with this team, is that Morgan Geekie again continues to stand out for this team on the offensive end. There are a couple of times with him where it seems like he's doing a little bit too much and probably could have tried to pass the puck and ends up losing it as defensemen kind of get over to him. But for the most part, it's a lot more good than some of those, again, overplays that he has. This is definitely going to continue to be a guy to watch as things go on. Beyond that, although I certainly wouldn't say it was going to be a concern coming into the season, it was also nice to see, especially after a less physical game against the Golden Knights, that in a much more physical game against a team like Nashville, the Kraken were absolutely able to hold their own in the physicality aspect of the game, and honestly, I thought even get the better of the hits when it came to that aspect of the game. And for those of you who like keeping track of the 3 stars of the game, the Kraken do get the first 2 of those as the winning team, with Winberg being the first star and McCann being the second star, both of them having a goal and an assist in this game. Of course, Tanev has 2 goals, his first 2 of the season. We talked about Geekie, who had 4 shots on goal but doesn't end up getting a point here. Donskoy does get a point. Eberle gets his second point of the season. Of course, Barre Boulet, we talked about having his first assist in his first game with the Kraken. And for Grubauer, while the base stat line doesn't necessarily look super impressive, having saved 27 of 30 for a save percentage of 900, again, his third period performance is definitely what won the Kraken this game. So I would say that any worries we might have had about him and those 2 goals on 3 shots in the first game and then a goal on the first shot this game, I think we can pretty much put those to bed, and some of those early season jitters with the new team that might have played a role in some of that definitely look like they've settled down with that solid third period that he had in this one. But that will do it for this one. So if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that I would appreciate you using. We will be back for another Kraken R&R after the Columbus game coming up here on Saturday. I'm going to be out of town for that one, so while I still will watch the game, I'm not exactly sure what that R&R will look like. I'll either wait to do it when I get back, which will be sometime right before those back-to-backs on Monday and Tuesday, or it'll look something different as I have to figure out some sort of recording setup on the road, but we'll figure that out when the time comes, which I guess is coming pretty quick. But either way, until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken.